tonight to discuss Saanach's tree protection bylaw. Just to let you all know that we will be recording the presentation section, but we will not be recording the Q&A. So yes, we're in the early stages of exploring new directions for the tree protection bylaw and the update. So your input tonight will help to guide where we go next with our work. So next slide, please. But of course, before we get started, we'd just like to take a moment to both honor and recognize that the District of Saanich is located on the ancestral and the unceded lands of the Lekwungen-speaking people, who are known today as the Songhe and Kosapsan nations, as well as the Wasanich people. And these are represented by the Sartlip, Paukachin, Sayout, Sekum, and Malahat nations. Indigenous people have cared for these lands since time immemorial, and as such, we're deeply grateful to continue this stewardship through our shared work in protecting and caring for Saanach's urban forest. Next slide. So this afternoon, we'll be starting with a short presentation to provide you with some context on the tree protection bylaw update and the work that is currently underway with our team and with the district. And we'll recap a little bit what was heard in some prior engagement that was done for Saanach's urban forest strategy and provide you with an overview of some of those key directions that are being explored for the bylaw update. And then later on, we will get into the Q&A.
Thanks, Tabitha. Okay, great. So I'll take us through a presentation, as Tabitha mentioned, and then look forward to your comments and questions. You should see in the little menu that's available to you if you hover over the top of your screen that there is a Q&A where you can enter questions, and please feel free to do that as I go through the presentation. At the end, Tabitha will take us through those questions and we'll endeavour to answer them all. So yeah, why this bylaw update, I think, is a good place to begin. In 2022, Saanich adopted its urban forest strategy update, and this strategy set a long-term canopy cover target of 44% by 2064, and also supports the 300 target that Council had previously adopted. And just a reminder that that target refers to having 3 trees visible from everybody's home, having an average of 30% canopy cover in every neighbourhood, and then having access to a green space within 300 metres. So the strategy included a specific action to update the tree protection bylaw so that the policies would align with the canopy cover goal and support long-term growth and sustainment of the canopy. And just to provide a little bit more context on distribution, based on 2019 data, Saanach's overall canopy cover was about 43%, but within the urban containment boundary, it's closer to 31%. And given that Council wants to see 30% in most neighbourhoods, right now there are some areas, some neighbourhoods that fall below that target. So we need to see both canopy retention and growth in those neighbourhoods, and a tree bylaw is one tool that can help to achieve that. We did also obtain some input from the public through engagement during the strategy that sort of touches on the bylaw too. And here's just a brief summary, but we heard that approximately 45% of participants wanted to see stronger tree protection, that respondents consistently preferred neighbourhoods that had the sort of larger, well-spaced trees and tree canopy, and that both climate resilience and canopy growth were strong priorities that we heard throughout that engagement. And then another big driver is the new provincial housing legislation. And because these bills require more small-scale multi-unit housing, there's priorities on approval speed, and they're going to result in higher densities, especially in transit areas. And so these types of changes mean that redevelopment is likely to accelerate across different parts of Saanich. And so the tree bylaw needs to align with this new context while still protecting and growing the urban forest where possible. And of course, most municipalities adopt tree bylaws because they recognise that trees play a major role in community health and wellbeing. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the benefits of trees, but some of the key ones that we highlight tend to be the fact that trees and canopy cover has a very strong relationship with reducing temperature as canopy cover increases. Trees assist with the regulation of stormwater and slope stability. Of course, they support biodiversity and habitat, and they help, improve air quality and overall human health. They're also really key to shaping the character of neighbourhoods and the district overall. And so these benefits and their maintenance really depends on maintaining both a healthy urban forest, but also one that has an extent of tree canopy cover and leaf area that really delivers these benefits over time. So to give you a little bit more context on the project itself, thought we'd start with just a little bit of an explanation of, what a tree bylaw is and what it can and can't do. So really what a tree bylaw does is that it sets rules for how trees are regulated through protection and through how they're managed through development processes and when they can be removed. It establishes things like which trees are protected under the bylaw. So that's often through like a DBH limit or species specific. It defines when a tree permit is required for cutting or damaging a tree. It defines how trees have to be protected when when development is occurring near them. It also defines things like reasons for removal, so why a permit would be issued, and then how replacement planting works. And then it contains information typically on fees, sometimes bonds or securities, and then how enforcement is achieved as well. And so Saanich has had a tree bylaw since 1993, so it's not a new thing for Saanich. And its last update was about 5 years ago in 2020. It's also important to understand the limitations of tree bylaws. So a tree bylaw can do all the things that I just went through on the previous slide, but it cannot prevent land from being developed for the uses and densities permitted by zoning, and it can't override provincial legislation or utility safety requirements. And often, as consultants from in various communities, we'd often hear people calling for a tree bylaw or a stronger tree bylaw. But a tree bylaw cannot always, or is not the only tool that is needed in order to regulate the outcomes for trees on the landscape. And that is largely because of, zoning really dictates how land is used. And if the zoning enables development, of a house on a lot, even if there's a big tree in the middle of that lot, the zoning is what gives people the right to develop, and therefore they can, and a tree bylaw cannot stop that activity from occurring. So really all these tools need to work together to achieve the best possible outcomes. A tree bylaw is an important one, but is not the only tool that's needed in order to ensure long-term canopy cover or space to plant or retain trees. So this bylaw review aims to bring the bylaw into better alignment with the official community plan and the urban forest strategy. It also aims to shift towards more canopy-based outcomes. So really thinking about the canopy cover goals that have been established through the strategy. We really want the tree bylaw to align with achieving those across the different land uses, as opposed to just doing sort of a simple tree replacement ratio. We also want to do updates that simplify its administration, that support the retention of high value trees, that close regulatory gaps. And then, of course, we're undertaking all of this engagement in order to hear how community values will also reflect on this process. So this work has three main parts. Essentially, we've done some background research and key directions work back in October to sort of understand what potential updates might look like. We've now gone to engagement, and that includes internally with staff, with industry stakeholders, as well as the public tonight. There's also the online survey, of course. And then the bylaw drafting will run from essentially now until January or February, when we'll go to council and aim for bylaw adoption in sort of March, April of 2026. So I'll run through in general sort of the areas where updates are being proposed. I've just categorized them according to sort of bigger changes related to tree retention, tree removal reasons, replacement trees, tree protection and bonding. And then there's also going to be a number of administrative or best management practices revisions. I won't detail what those are, but they're really just things that relate to how the bylaw functions, and they're sort of not changes that people will really notice in terms of how the rules apply. So in terms of retention, we want the updated bylaw to explore ways to prioritise retention of healthy, well-situated trees, especially in areas with low canopy cover. And so that's really about recognising we're going to have these housing pressures, but how can we protect the high value trees on these sites wherever possible? And the approach also aims to better recognise the value of mature trees, particularly those that are municipal, by aiming to capture their asset value. And then we want to explore ways as well to incentivise retention, really encourage people to keep those trees on site where possible, and disincentivise the idea of cash in lieu. So that idea of removing a tree, paying cash for the replacements to be planted elsewhere on a municipal property instead of on site. Really want those trees to ideally be retained or replaced on site, or then, if necessary, replaced on district land instead. So as well, we want to look at acceptable reasons for removal, and the bylaw may introduce clearer and more consistent removal categories. So these include removal of trees that are invasive species, trees that have that no longer fit site conditions, and it'll look to clarify some of the issues that come up that aren't currently covered under the bylaw, such as moving a house. As well, on rural lands, we may look at changing the 1 tree per acre rule on rural properties to prevent gradual clear cutting over time. In terms of replacement trees, the review is going to explore a move towards, as I mentioned, a canopy-based or possibly density-based replacement requirement. And really that is in order to align with canopy cover goals rather than, as I mentioned, the current sort of canopy sort of tree replacement ratio that applies. As well, smaller stock sizes are going to be considered both to sort of reduce the costs, increase the availability of different replacement tree species, and also because it can be easier to establish smaller stock. In addition, we want to look at how we can adjust standards to achieve better quality of outcomes in terms of, being able to support, for example, larger canopy trees wherever possible, rather than just quantity. So less focus on the number of trees that are put in, and where we can focus on the quality of trees that are going to go in. And then finally, updating replacement securities so that they reflect more accurately the cost of planting, maintaining, and maintaining those trees on district lands. In terms of tree protection and bonding, we're also going to be looking at the protection requirements during development, and things like defining when arborist supervision is needed, and then tying that to bonds for retained trees, or the enforcement of tree protection measures. And then finally, as I mentioned, some of the updates will focus on things like modernising definitions, improving clarity, and ensuring the bylaw is easier to administer. And these changes won't introduce new policy direction per se, but just support clearer enforcement and more consistent interpretation.